Good morning, YouTubers. Gus Estacio from Healing X Outreach, back at it again. It's December 6th, 2019, and that means that's an important date in history for two reasons. One, I was born, so my mother, Sylvia, formerly Medina Estacio, who has passed on, did two great things in her life. She gave birth to my sister Melissa, who actually was a bigger baby than me and is a shrimp to this day, and to this big dummy right here she gave birth to. But I'm going to start a series for this month that will be significant to many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses starting today, because there's somebody else who is honored on December 6th every year, and is the feast of Saint Nicholas. And we honor the great man Saint Nicholas on December 6th, and I'm going to tell you something every week, maybe twice a week, concerning Christmas that you probably are unaware about. In the description below, every time I give what I call a Christmas tidbit, I will leave the link to a live stream I did on the history of Christmas, on whether Jesus was born, or at least was believed to be born, how early Christians arrived at December 25th, another date on which Jesus is believed to be born is January 6th, and how that's significant to December 25th, about Nicholas, about the tree, about the weather in December in Israel. All of those little questions are answered in the description below in a live stream I did. But I will give a tidbit. And today's tidbit is about the dear man, good old jolly Saint Nick. The guy that they call Santa Claus. The Northerners adopted Nicholas as the patron saint of children. But something that you should know is that Nicholas is not from the North Pole. Shocker! I have been, since my kids were little children, and my son this year was given the horrendous news that all of the Christmas presents that he's gotten through the years have been from mom and dad and grandpa, pop, and not from good old jolly Saint Nick. And he was shocked. My son said, "How could you afford all of those presents?" I said, "Well, you're a good boy." And every year I always tell my kids, well, this is the last big Christmas you're gonna have, and somehow I pull it off the next year, and I have a big Christmas for them, and they get all the presents that they want or desire, and I just pull it through. That's what I do. I work hard for my kids. I love my children, and they're good kids. My kids are not bad kids. Their teachers have always said great things about them. They're well behaved, and to give you an idea of how well behaved they are and what great hearts they have. When my son the news was broken and he's in middle school now, so I had to make sure that he wasn't going around believing in a fat white guy in a red suit coming down the chimney or or burglarizing a house with a reverse burglarization. But he would have been made fun of in middle school. But he's a good kid, and he's innocent, And my son, boy, he's growing like a tree. So anyway, so this is what he said. He says, we asked him, we always say, look, give us your Christmas list in October. We try to get all the things that they want by Halloween or Hallows Eve, and I'll probably do one on about Hallows Eve next year, but and it's Christian origins actually. But anyway, so he says, well, I don't want to tell you everything because you guys can't afford it, and I had to tell him, look, give us your full list. He doesn't want to burden us. That's what he said. And I just think that's just such a sweet gesture from my good boy Ethan. So anyway, so this is the story of Nicholas. Nicholas came from Turkey. He was born in a city called Patara, Turkey. And not very far from Patara, he would serve as the pastor or bishop in a church in the town that is now called Demre. And ironically, Turkey, which is predominantly Muslim. In fact, I think under the new presidency of Turkey, it is radicalized Islam. If we could say that radical and Islam are an oxymoron of terms, they're not. Islam by nature is radical. But so what happened was he winded up serving in the church in Demre, and how he winded up serving in the church in Demre was he was born of two wealthy parents, and the two parents, look at that, I don't want that in there. There we go. The two wealthy parents, let me move that a little bit. The two wealthy parents, of course, they had died. They both died. So he was left in the care and keeping of the Christian church. And the Christian church was taking care of him. And I guess they died of some illness or some type of disease that infected their home. So he was a survivor of his two parents. And the bishop there in Demre had a dream that the first person that would come into the church for morning prayers and morning service, which then you could have church any time of the day. And on the western side of the empire was Catholic Christianity, and on the eastern side of the empire was Orthodox Christianity. Turkey was more of the western side. So here comes young Nicholas, and he was a young man at that time, and he came for morning prayers or Vespers service. And so the bishop appointed him to be the pastor. Now, Nicholas was a little bit, having trepidation about being a pastor. But he did go into the service of ministry to be a pastor. And he was a great pastor. In fact, one of our Christmas traditions hails from Nicholas's experience and life and charity in the Christian church. As I said, he was born of wealthy parents. But as a pastor, back then, he took an oath of poverty. So he would only live a life to the Lord and live a life only towards the provisions that is given to him in the service of God. Well, Nicholas, being the pastor of Demry, there was a story of a blacksmith. There was a blacksmith in the town of Demry who had 3 daughters, and he was a widower. Now, at the time when Nicholas was serving as pastor, the emperor sent out an edict that all girls unwedded by their 18th birthday would serve in the service of the empire. And this was, of course, a pagan emperor, would serve as, I think it was under Aurelian, as slaves for 2 years in the service of the empire. Now, to serve as a slave in the service of the empire would mean not just being a slave. It would mean that you would become a temple prostitute. So here this blacksmith has a dilemma. He has 3 daughters, and he's this poor blacksmith. He's a widower, and he doesn't know what to do, and they are becoming of age. In fact, they're probably of age at this time. And in order for them to be wedded, back then, of course, you had to pay a bride price. So if you had daughters, it could be a costly affair to have your daughters wedded, because you had to pay a bride price for your daughters to get married. And usually the bride price would go in assistance to helping a young man have a home for his newfound family. Well, so what he did was, Nicholas heard about the blacksmith and about his dilemma. No doubt the blacksmith was praying in the church and was going to confession and confessing these things. And Nicholas, of course, is the pastor. So what does Nicholas do? His heart pours out to this poor man. And he goes in the middle of the night, i.e. Santa Claus, at the stroke of midnight, visiting people's homes. And he takes 3 satchels of gold coins, which he has because he's a wealthy man and he has this wealth. And he throws them through the window of the blacksmith. And they fall into the shoes of the 3 daughters. Or maybe upon the shoes of the 3 daughters that he has, which they would keep their shoes, all lined up. Like people do to this day, except people do it at the entrance of their doors. If you have people come and visit, some people have this tradition because they don't want their house and their carpet and their floor to get muddied up with the dirt from outside. They have you leave your shoes at the door, or right inside, when you enter into the home, right at that little entranceway where the door is. So the shoes have become a tradition for many Northerners, many Europeans. And on this day, which my kids have what we call mini Christmas, because it's a form of mini Christmas. Native Scandinavian countries will have their children put their shoes near the fireplace. And what the kids will do today is that there will be candy or small gifts at their shoes or under their shoes or in their shoes. And so that's what we do. We, on my birthday and St. Nicholas Day, we have what my kids call mini Christmas on St. Nicholas Day. this is the Christmas tidbit about Nicholas. Now, the shoes, which in Scandinavian countries have become in America, stockings. And so it all has to do with feet. And so on Christmas Day, a lot of people put up stockings, which represent, of course, the feet and the story of Nicholas saving the daughters of a blacksmith in the town of Demre in Turkey by giving them a small present, which was the money that the blacksmith needed to have his daughters wedded, to pay for their dowry so that they could not become temple prostitutes according to the edict of the empire and be wedded to a man who loves them and would care for them rather than to serve in illicit prostitution in the empire of Rome. So that's how we have the stockings on Christmas Day, and that is what we celebrate today on St. Nicholas Day, December 6th, every year for Orthodox Christians particularly, and Scandinavian Christians. So in Russia, Russian Orthodox churches honor St. Nicholas, who is the savior of children, that is, the patron saint of children. He did other things. There's a couple of stories of what he did also for sailors and merchants, and the great story of his imprisonment because of the rude slap to Bishop Arius at the Council of Nicaea, which had him put into the stocks in Carcia, Rome. And the prison house is there to this day in Carcia, Rome, and is now been made into a church. But the church that Nicholas has served at, which is in Demre, is still there to this day. His tomb is in the church, and there's also a tomb of Nicholas in Bari, Italy. Well, you're probably saying 2 tombs. Well, yeah, well, this is the thing. Catholics and Orthodox will have maybe a few of his bones in Bari and maybe a few of his bones in Demre. And it is very often that Catholics and Orthodox Christians are obsessed with history. And so there's no surprise that in any Catholic church of any worth that you would find some relic leading to the past, whether it's a bone of an ancient Christian saint or some type of vessel or instrument that reminds them and tells the story of an ancient Christian in the past. I'll give you an example. And we are 18 minutes in, and I'll finish this in 30. Me and William Albridge, who used to be on my podcast, is a great Christian apologist, awesome debater, had done many debates, and to my knowledge, in the many debates he did on my podcast, he probably, in my opinion, only lost one. Only lost one. William is an astounding historian. He's a rarity in the Catholic Church. So anyway, we went to the shrine of the Immaculate Conception here in Washington, D.C., which is one of the 8 wonders of the world. And it is beautiful basilica. And in the basement of the basilica, there's a small church in the basilica in the basement. Now, there are lots of relics there for display and for tours. And you'll have like ancient popes, the vestigial hats and things like that. Anyway, in the basilica, under the basilica, in the crypt church, they call it the crypt church. I think the most interesting thing about the entire basilica was this little thing of note about the basilica. The basilica is huge. It's beautiful. It's decadent. You can take a look at it every Christmas on TV. They always have a Christmas service on television. But in the crypt church, there's a small church in the basement, and you go into the crypt church, and in the mortar of the walls of the crypt church, they have bricks. Now, you can't visibly see it, but they'll let you know. It's all about surrounding yourself around the people of God in one way or another. Surrounding yourself around the ancient church in one way or another. Catholics are obsessed with this, and I think it's a wonderful thing. So, in the crypt church, they have bricks in the mortar from the Church of Antioch, one of the most ancient churches, a church that is talked about in the Bible. And this mortar goes all the way down to the early 2nd century. And so it's not even something you can visibly see. It's something that they placed and they put into the mortar of the crypt church, which is in the basement of the church. And it's not even about something visible. It's about being surrounded around history. And that is the case with Nicholas. So they have a tomb in Bari, and they have a tomb in Demri. And the church there in Demri, which is an old church, but it's beautiful. You can see how old it is. Just look up St. Nicholas Church in Demri, Italy, and go to Google Images, and you'll get to see it. And this is the church that Nicholas served at. And people still have weddings there, even though there's no serving pastor there. And so they can get a pastor, and they will have him come and do weddings in Nicholas's church in Demri. And tourists come to there all the time. And this is, by the way, in Turkey, a place where Islam dominates, but Nicholas is still a figurehead in Turkey. In fact, they even still have statues of Nicholas in Turkey, because this is his native home. And I guess even Muslims would honor and respect a man of God from their ancient past. So that's my little Christmas tidbit, a little bit about good old jolly Saint Nick. I think Eddie Murphy was correct. I don't care what the white man say, Santa Claus is a black man. And it's true. Nicholas was a man of color. And most of the early Christians, the formers of the Nicene Creed, were from Egypt and the Middle East and North African continent. And it doesn't really matter. They were Christians. But most people don't know they were African Christians. And so it's really interesting when I encounter Muslims and they talk about Christianity being the white man's religion. This is the history, the early African Christianity that I appeal to prove that it wasn't, it started with African roots. So that's my little Christmas tidbit. You all have a blessed day. Happy mini Christmas and happy St. Nicholas Day to those of you who are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, who embrace Catholicism or Orthodoxy, or Protestants like me who still honor the man. God bless you. Happy birthday, St. Nicholas. Bye-bye.